So the Francis Ngannou MMA sweepstakes are starting to wind down. Remember, this is a huge, huge opportunity for his future opponent, with 2 M's being the reported payout of any of the Predator's future MMA foes. You got to believe that Renan Ferreira is in the pole position after last year's PFL Finals win and Saturday's dub over Bader. Are you in or are you out on Ngannou versus Ferreira, Matt?
Yes, I am in. I'm in 100% because aside from the dream matchup that everybody wants to see in John Jones and Francis Ngannou, I think this is the best next available option. And I think again, going back to kind of what we talked about in the first question with PFL versus Bellator, I think PFL had the best possible outcome with Ferreira winning that fight in the manner that he did, because he needed to go out there and look like an absolute monster in order to help sell this fight against Francis Ngannou, if and when that does happen. So you have him go out there, spark Bader in 21 seconds. You look like a monster. You're 6'8". You can now say you knocked out a Bellator heavyweight champion or a 2-division Bellator champion, and you did it with quickness without getting touched. These are the sort of things that you need to have on your resume to help sell a fight against Francis Ngannou to the public. A fight against Francis Ngannou, who's about to step in there with Anthony Joshua, who's already been in there against Tyson Fury, who's had the UFC championship run. You need somebody like Ferreira, man, and I think that was the best outcome possible. So I'm all in on this fight, given the result of what happened at PFL versus Bellator champions out in Riyadh. Because I think let's just pretend Bader won this fight by grinding out 15 minutes of wrestling and wall install type of fight. Would we be excited about Bader versus Ngannou? I don't think so. So a 21-second knockout by the 6'8" guy who looks super scary is a lot easier to sell. And I think that's the fight that hopefully, once PFL clears up whatever confusion that there may be present with Ngannou, hopefully this is the fight that they go with, if UFC, because we know UFC is not going to play ball and be like, okay, let's do Jones and Ngannou. Let's cross promote. We know that's not going to happen. So we have to be all in on Ngannou and Ferreira here.
Matt, do you think something might be happening behind the scenes? I mean, Ngannou has stated that's who he'd like to fight. His coach, Eric Nixick, was on Junkie Radio saying the same thing. But we didn't have a face-off. And face-offs, those go a long way.
Exactly. I think that's why there was, I don't know if it's necessarily some confusion or some miscommunication or whatnot, but the fact that Ngannou, when they put the camera on Ngannou after Ferreira got his hand raised, Ngannou was just clapping hands, dabbing everybody up in the crowd. He's like, all right, guys, peace. No, like Ngannou should have been in the cage doing a face-off, like to get this set up. So like, I'm not sure what happened there behind the scenes, if there was miscommunication, if it was never communicated, we don't know yet. But hopefully there's no sort of thing like to where Ngannou is just being like, no, I'm not fighting anymore in the PFL. Of course, a lot of this will hinge on what happens with Joshua as well. So, I think there's going to be a little bit of a wait and see sort of thing going on.
All right, Danny, we go to you for a second there. I thought a Chupacabra removed you from the set, but you're back. Danny, are you in or out on Ngannou versus Ferreira?
I'm in. I think, we were just talking about how this wasn't a great night for PFL, but I think this was probably their best outcome in terms of individual fights. I've been saying since the beginning that I thought that the fight between Renan Ferreira and Francis Ngannou would have been extremely interesting as far as just the styles itself. It probably wouldn't be a big fight just because Renan Ferreira is not that well known, but if PFL really invests a lot of their marketing assets into Ferreira, they could make it into something. Because I mean, as Matt pointed out, there is something there, dude. The dude's 6'8", shredded, got a 6-pack. He's freaking melting everybody. He's very much like a Brazilian Francis Ngannou. So I'm all in for that fight. I think it just made it bigger because now Renan Ferreira not only won the season but also defeated heavyweight champion, Bellator heavyweight champion Ryan Bader. So it just makes the fight even bigger. They need to push this guy as much as possible in order to make that fight with Francis Ngannou feel as big. Because I do believe that Renan Ferreira, if you drop him in the UFC right now, he's probably top 10. So this would be a big fight. But I want to make a little parenthesis here, and I know that this is a little bit off topic, but I have to say it. We kind of not back, but like we very much reported on and supported Francis Ngannou's free agent move and all that, because that's the way how sports should work, right? And you're happy for Francis Ngannou to get the bag and all that. But I'm not liking what I'm seeing from Francis Ngannou, and I'm not saying you got to be a super company man. And yeah, these guys at the end of the day are independent contractors. But look, PFL has treated you very, very well and has been giving you a lot of free reins, as they should, for your boxing career, this and that, and has given you a lot of benefits to your career. And part of the reason why his free agent move has been so successful was because of PFL. And nowadays you see Francis Ngannou, I feel like, completely disrespecting PFL. Yeah, maybe nobody at PFL told him that he didn't have to face off against Renan Ferreira. But what do? You go, no, I'm going to go in there, even if I'm not going to fight this guy, because we don't know if that's ever going to be done officially. But I'm going to go in there, face off. I'm going to go in there, do some interviews, talk about the fight, highlight the fight, because these guys are paying me, right? Like I gotta sort of live up to my end of the deal. But instead, you get him leaving right after the fight, and you also get him, calling out John Jones every now and then in interviews and saying that's his dream fight, when we know that fight's not going to happen. Him saying he doesn't close the door on the UFC, this and that. If I'm PFL, I start thinking that investment, and I don't know, I start having a sit down and a talk with Francis Ngannou, like, my guy, this is a two-way street here. It's not only one way. So I don't know. That's all I'm going to highlight, because we gave a lot of props to Francis Ngannou on his way out to the UFC and everything that he's done, as we should. I don't feel like he's handling this quite well.
I think that's fair. All right. Well put. Goes. Ferreira, excuse me. Ngannou versus Ferreira. Are you pretty much all in on this one? It looks like Ferreira, has the resume as of late to be the guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. We go back to maybe last year, I didn't have too much interest in this. I was looking more at some of the free agents that they could possibly bring in. But after the last two performances, dude, this dude is a monster. He looks really good. He looks like he's improving, and he just doesn't get the respect that he deserves in mixed martial arts. I think he gained a little bit of that this past weekend, but I'm with these guys. Like, the fact that you miss out on that opportunity to bring both fighters in the cage and really promote what is next kind of doesn't make things look too steady. I mean, that's one hell of a holding pattern that you got to sit through if you're Ferreira, because think about it. You just have to show up and fight, and you're guaranteed a huge, massive paycheck. So to not really know what the next move is there, that can be a little alarming. And just the amount of time that was put into the Ngannou Jones storyline, right? And how happy some of the commentators looked as they were talking about that. It just kind of made everything a little confusing. That fight, look, man, we'd all love to see Jones fight Ngannou, but it just doesn't seem like those are in the cards. I don't know that that's going to happen. And that sucks, because we've always tried in mixed martial arts to kind of get away from that boxing model where you will have two great fighters that you want to see face off, but because of promoters and all that, we don't get to see that. In MMA, we were so happy to be able to put those types of fights together, and now it's kind of looking a little bit more like boxing in that sense, and then you don't really have the next step with those guys. I'm kind of with Danny. This is I'm not saying PFL has to grab Ngannou by his shirt and tell him what the hell are you doing, but they do have to have some sort of sense of direction, especially on fight night, because fight night, everything has to go perfectly, and there were some kind of weird moments and questions surrounding all that.
Good stuff, guys. You're right. And, we do have some footage of Ngannou and Jones meeting up. I got a follow-up for you guys, right? But let's go to this real quick. There's not much to be from the audio, but just seeing them again, sizing each other up, and you can already feel like not necessarily tension, but I think excitement of what could come. Let's go to this real quick.
Yes, sir. God bless, Princess. Thank you. You too. Johnny boy. You need to go back to
The biggest balls right there, the biggest tease, bro.
Not, no real face off, no shove or anything. A lot of respect, but still, it's that dream matchup ever since, like a Couture and Brock, or well, that actually went down. Sorry, Couture or Fedor Brock. This is the matchup a lot of people would have wanted to see, and we haven't seen. But guys, since the deck's been reshuffled a little bit, Ngannou's kind of more towards the boxing side. He's given a little bit of a Heisman, I guess, towards PFL and facing off against Ferreira. Let me ask you guys this. What's your gut tell you about Ngannou versus Jones happening one day? Possible or pipe dream, Matt?
I mean, fingers crossed it does happen, right? And it happens within like at least the next 3 years, if it's going to happen, before these guys start getting too old and start to lose their best versions of themselves. It's going to take Francis going back to the UFC though, because as some comments in the chat are talking about right now, what if Saudi just threw a ridiculous amount of money towards the UFC? UFC is going to be like, no, like protecting our 3 letters is more important than co-promoting and doing it for, a few $100 million or whatever it's going to be. They did it with Conor. They let Conor go box Floyd because it was not an MMA fight. It was a boxing fight. And, it's a different arena, so to speak, altogether. But they're not going to co-promote with a fellow MMA promotion just to make this sort of fight happen, because the UFC doesn't need it. For one, they're killing it. You can see they're opening PIs all across the globe. They're profiting more than they ever have. And this is one fight that, as much as everybody wants to see it, and I'm sure even Dana as a fan wants to see it, he doesn't need to see it, so to speak, at what it's going to cost his brand, so to speak. So yeah, hopefully it does happen. And I do want to say one thing about that clip real quick. You see the mutual respect between those two guys as they're kind of playfully, Johnny boy sort of thing, right? Both men in their heads are thinking, I can kick this dude's ass. And both men are probably right. That's what's fascinating about it.
Yeah, for sure, man. They got to be sizing each other up. All right, we go back to Danny in Mexico City. What's your gut tell you about Ngannou and Jones happening one day? Forget about possible or pipe dream. How about si se puede or no mames way?
I'm gonna say no mames, bro. I don't think that's gonna happen. The UFC doesn't like to co-promote, and I don't see John Jones fighting out his contract. From what I understand, he has a lengthy contract left. And Francis Ngannou, I feel like he's just too busy with the world of boxing. And look, Matt mentioned, and I disagree here with Matt in the sense that he says, maybe in the next 3 years before these guys get too old. I feel like they're getting too old right now. I feel like we got one good year at most from both of these guys. The new generations here, the Tom Aspinalls, all these new names, I think that's what's going to be coming in the next 2 or 3 years. So look, if they find a way to make it in the next year, great. I'd be the happiest guy, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think John Jones is going to do 1 or 2 more. He's got a big legacy to protect. Remember, he's never actually lost, although officially he has won. And Ngannou, man, he's making so much money. He's going to fight Joshua, maybe 1 more, and then just kick his feet up and enjoy life as he should.
All right, goes unanimous. Or no, I'm sorry. Matt thinks it's possible. Danny's like, nah. What do you think?
I don't think it's going to happen. It's just not in the UFC's nature, right? And that clock, I feel like it's ticking a little bit more on the John Jones side. I mean, at light heavyweight, weren't we all kind of saying, hey, is this guy kind of slowing down a little bit? Some of these guys are catching up to him. It's been a minute, man. He's had a hell of a career. I just don't think we have the time to put this together unless they co-promote, and we just don't see the UFC do that type of thing. And it's unfortunate, because this fight, like Matt said, they both have a very good case. It would be really hard to pick that fight. And the longer we wait and the more this boxing experiment goes on for Francis Ngannou, the more of an excuse there is if he loses, right? Well, I haven't been training MMA. I've been doing boxing. It just doesn't feel right. I feel like it has to happen sooner than later, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Jones had said that he is warming up to Miocic, Aspinall, and Ngannou at some point. Man, that would be epic. And if he could pull that off, I'm sorry, even though it would only be 3 title defenses, and Miocic has 4, he would go down as the greatest heavyweight ever, along with the greatest light heavyweight ever. And he's kind of already the greatest ever to begin with. But imagine just having all those unofficial titles. That would be pretty epic if he can do it. And I know Jones fans are excited about the possibility, but we shall see. It does look like Ngannou versus Ferreira is the play. Can I sneak in one more? Just one of you answer this. We don't have time. We have to move on. But is anyone almost thinking Ferreira really has a better shot of beating Ngannou, who's removed 2 years from MMA, by the way? And Ferreira's obviously a beast. He's getting better. Like, is this maybe more evenly matched than before? Anyone want to take that one?
I feel like it is. I feel like if like I said, I feel like the guy's improving, but at the same time, it starts to level out a little bit because Francis Ngannou just isn't doing mixed martial arts. He's concentrated on boxing. This isn't a guy who's like a high level boxer that's just trying to get better. This is a guy that hasn't really done that much boxing. He has a big gap to fill, especially when you're talking about guys like Joshua, Tyson Fury. So I imagine if he has done mixed martial arts, it's been sporadic here and there. And we all know what happens when you're out of that gym in MMA, it hurts your performance. So I would say, yeah, it starts to level out a little bit.
Matt, you had a little expression on your face. What are you thinking? Is it still Ngannou all day, or do you think Ferreira's got a shot at this?
It's still Ngannou. Like, if I'm picking or betting any of those things, I'm going Ngannou. But there's a part of Ferreira at this point in his career where there's just like that certain level of fearlessness. Like he would go in there and just, throw all caution to the wind and basically just try to make something spectacular happen. I mean, you would give him a little bit of credit for that, but I still think Ngannou would handle business.